Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, Goeienaand, Mensa, and Shalom. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. My name is Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it. It is a Wednesday evening at 7:30. That means my face, this mug right over here, is going to be with you for the next 25 minutes to 30 minutes as we unpack a topical issue happening midweek. Welcome to it. Remember, your only price of admission on any of my shows, whether it's Liberty on Friends, my vlogs, or the BDL show, is for you to hit that like button. Do it now, whether you're watching the stream on the simulcast, rather, on Facebook, Twitter, or on YouTube. Do me a big favor and hit that like button, will you? Welcome to it. Tonight's show, as I said, we're going to unpack what is a topical issue. And I say topical quite literally in the sense of right now, as I speak, we might even have the president or or Buffalo Bill, that's the Cogta Minister, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, addressing the nation around the issue of the health regulations, or that is, correction, let me take two steps back. The national state of disaster, which ended at the end of last month, and this 30-day transitional period, as they called it, for these regulations that kept certain rules, such as masking indoor and a whole plethora of other rules, which they argued rather, or they're empowered to do under the Disaster Management Act. Now, we're going to have a look at that tonight as we ask the question, with this transitional period set to end at 12 tonight, very Cinderella-esque type story, that chariot of theirs that they've been riding, the chariot of tyranny will turn into a pumpkin again, and all those rats which they were using to enforce this damn thing will turn into meek mice once again. But if you will, with that analogy, will they allow the power to end, or will they dig into that bag and ask their fairy godmother, if I keep with this analogy, jeepers, it's really growing legs, to give them more powers, or to extend mask wearing, that is the mask mandates and the various COVID-19 rules that will morph into existing legislation, existing health legislation in this country. So we're going to ask that question tonight. What's your view on this? Please hit me up in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are. Can politicians let go of these powers? Can politicians, ANC politicians in government in particular, let go of the whims, the rules, the powers they've never had before and they've enjoyed for the last 2 plus years? Can they actually let go of them when the clock strikes 12 tonight? And to help you answer that question, I have two fellas with me who will also answer the question of, if they don't let go of those powers, what can we, the ordinary citizenry, led, if you will, by civil society, do to push back and to fight back and demand our freedoms from these power-hungry politicians? So, with me having waffled away as an intro here, let me actually bring on my guest tonight. Remember, this is a short conversation, so make sure you hit that like button. Do it right now. Every time you hit a like button, Father Christmas finds an extra gram of Coke, which makes delivering presents much, much better. That's not true, never is, but it does help the show. Speaking about my guest, who is just as addictive as cocaine, if you will, I'm not sure he'll appreciate that analogy, but he's a firm favorite here on the BDL show, and wearing his cap tonight as the spokesperson for Dear SA, that awesome organization that allows you to participate in the dialogue, the conversations around policy in this country. Gideon Joubert, Baba, good evening.
Good evening, Sishle. Good evening, everybody else. And thanks for tuning in. And I think we're going to unpack quite a bit of important stuff in a very short show tonight.
Absolutely, and welcome to it. It's always nice to have Gideon on the show. Another chap who we haven't seen in a while, equally quite popular. I remember the comment section back when he was on the show, standing in and giving us Afriforum's perspective, because Afriforum have boldly come out and said that if the government head in this particular direction, they will take action. Thank you, God, for organizations like Afriforum. I'm talking, of course, about Jacque Broodryk. Jacque, goeienaand, hoe gaan het?
Goeienaand Siglem. Baie dankie vir die uitnodiging en good evening to your listeners.
Absolutely, welkom na die program. Laat ons praat oor, let's talk about the actual legislation at the moment, insofar as what we were told at the beginning, or rather at the end of last month. The president appears on our screens, waxes lyrical about, you know what, we're ending this lockdown, he says, or rather, to be specific, we're ending the state of disaster, he says. But here's the catch before you guys celebrate too much. We have a quote-unquote transitionary period of lingering legislation, which we're looking, in his words, to incorporate into existing law. Gideon, I'm sure you guys had quite a lot of feedback from effectively the people who often look for commentary on this particular issue. Has it been well received by the public?
Well, it's been our most successful single campaign ever run. I think in the comment period, which was about 30 days, we facilitated 283,436 individual submissions. And of that, if I had to give a breakdown, about 96 point something percent, was over 96% rejected the draft amended NHA, National Health Act regulations in their entirety. Just over 2% did not fully support or rejected, were slightly on the fence about it. And just over 1.5% were for it. So the overwhelming majority of the public, or at least the feedback we got from the public, was to reject essentially this legislation. It's been a massive campaign. And I think it would be very difficult for government to ignore this. However, we do have some concerns about how they handled this public participation process. And I don't know if this is the correct time to unpack it, or if we're just going to come back to that rather, because there are quite a few elements there that I think is worth mentioning.
Absolutely. We'll unpack it in a moment. I want to just come to Jacque on this particular issue, and we will get to it in a moment, really, because, again, it does speak to the insidious nature in which government, and the contempt, actually, which government has treated South Africans generally when it comes to the management of the pandemic. It's almost been a tone, Jacque, of, well, actually, yes, although there are legislated approaches around how us as government are meant to engage you as the citizen, we've already made the decision beforehand. We're just doing this as an almost window dressing exercise at the moment. However, Jacque, as you and maybe your counterparts at DSA might say, you guys are going to actually put teeth to the requirements that the government actually engages the citizenry.
Yes, we're definitely going to do that. Like Gideon mentioned, both Afriforum and South Africa found the entire participation process very suspect, and we don't think it was done according to book. We've had a lot of complaints from people who have claimed that people who use campaign software and so on, who claim that they can tell that their submissions were deleted without ever being opened. So that's fishy. The fact that government seems to now be pushing ahead with these amendments to the Health Act, which they're probably going to push through tonight, even though they received more than 310,000 submissions just from our two organizations. That's not including all the other organizations who campaign against this. It's impossible that they could have read through all of those submissions and seriously considered all of them in the time frame that they've had. So we do get the impression that the idea to amend the health regulations, this decision was taken quite a while back, and they had to kind of facilitate a vehicle and a way to make this happen without causing too much of a stir. But luckily, we know how government operates. We know that they're not to be trusted, and they're not reliable. So we saw this coming. And thanks to the support of our members and of DSA and the great campaign that they drove, we're going to take this to court as soon as they publish those regulations. We're going to challenge it.
Absolutely. And this is where perhaps, Gideon, we get to that exact discussion as to what exactly some of these insidious rules, directions, codes, regulations that they're now shifting out of what was their special purpose vehicle, that is the state of disaster. Now that that's ended, they're looking to now stash all of these powers that they gave themselves into existing legislation. Now, as government prepares for the end of the national state of disaster, a flurry of, as I said, directions, codes, regulations, dealing with the various aspects of the pandemic were published. This was in mid-March, essentially. and on the 23rd of March, as they put it, to ensure ongoing regulation of COVID-19 related matters. Gideon, do you want to just talk to us about some of the top ones that you are concerned about? Gideon? Okay, I don't know if I've lost Gideon there. I'll remove him for a moment. Jacque, I think I still have you with me, but maybe let me pose that question to you, Jacque. You know, they're looking to, as I said, shift a lot. I saw the comment section is going pretty rude. Relax, guys. He's not dead. He's still with us. But, you know, Gideon, as I just quickly fix my little panel. Yep, there we go. Jacque, excuse me, you know, a lot of these existing powers, which they've really relished. I mean, the state of disaster gave these politicians powers that they've never had before, and I think they really, really relished it. The idea that they can even just make up regulations at a whim. Two central figures come to mind. One, you know, Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, with his quote-unquote family meetings. And of course, the real enforcer, though, is a one Buffalo Bill, as we call her on the show, because much like the character Buffalo Bill, she kept the country in the basement and asked us if we want to put the mask on or else we'll get the hose again. But what are some of these regulations, Jacque, that they're basically pushing into existing law under the pseudonym, if you will, of health regulations? What can we expect them to do if they do it tonight?
I'd like to just touch on something that you mentioned before I answer your question, if you don't mind, and that's these power-hungry politicians and how they just made up regulations at a whim. Now, we know that they definitely did make up regulations at a whim because more than one of their own scientific advisors have come out and said, people who served on the Coronavirus Command Council came out and said, government is simply ignoring our advice. They're making up their own regulations, their own decisions. We saw that happened. It's not just our interpretation, even though it was pretty obvious from the public's perspective. But yeah, so if we look at some of these amendments that they are trying to bring into the Health Act now, they're trying to amend it by adding regulations to the Health Act. And what these regulations stipulate are actually quite spine-chilling stuff. We're back to legalizing the forcing of patients into quarantine camps. Now, Afriforum has already won a court case regarding quarantine camps, so it's illogical why they would once again try and bring this into legislation. So yeah, forcing people into quarantine camps, forcing medical treatment onto anyone with an identifiable medical disease, not specifying what this medical treatment will entail. I mean, I thought we were past this part of human history. We've had the Nuremberg trials. We've been there. There's a reason why bodily autonomy is enshrined in our constitution, yet now government want to fall back on that once again. This will give them the power to still keep on enforcing mask mandates, for instance, in whichever way or form they want to enforce it. And it also still give them the authority to put a limit on gatherings, whether public or private. So it's very concerning, it's very backwards, and it's absolutely unnecessary regulations.
Absolutely, and I just need to bring my guest back. Oh, there he is. Gideon, welcome back.
Thank
but,
you.
we were just unpacking exactly what it is that politicians are trying to shift from what used to be their special vehicle, right? Their special purpose vehicle, the national state of disaster, into existing regulation via various amendments. Now, as you know, and Jacque was just raising one of those concerning regulations, you know, there is a lot of concern having been raised as specifically, aside from the regulations, the broad powers that these draft regulations will give government and politicians in dealing with COVID and other diseases. Now, Jacque has already mentioned that, you know, effectively they're returning the notion of quarantining people, effectively using force, albeit by, as they put it, you know, they've got to get a court order must be obtained to compel a person into quarantine. As Jacque rightly said, Afriforum having won that particular legal battle at the height of the level 5 lockdown nonsense. But here's where it got concerning for me, and I want you to chime in here, Gideon, as you also unpack what you find of concern. In addition, those who've been, as they put it, confirmed to have a notifiable medical condition. This is, of course, a category of diseases which are in the existing Health Act, which allow the government to have certain powers. Yellow fever is one, for example. Now, they've included the spicy cough, or I'll still have to say that for YouTube purposes, as one of those medical conditions. Now, here's the kicker. With a confirmed case of a notifiable medical condition, you may not refuse to have a blood sample taken from you, or even refuse to, as they put it, submit to mandatory prophylaxis, treatment, isolation, or quarantining. That is a very worrisome power to give this government, firstly, and these sort of politicians.
Well, that's exactly it. And I have significant doubts whether any of these things would actually pass constitutional muster. If you look past that horrible specific regulation, and there's quite a few more of them in there, the regulations, the proposed amendments to the Health Act regulations also give government departments significant powers pertaining bringing back a form of lockdown, bringing back curfew, travel bans, alcohol bans, bans on gathering. The amount of social engineering that the powers for social engineering that this legislation give government is far in excess what regulations are supposed to be. I mean, these are regulations to an existing act, and I think that the government's reach is far exceeding their grasp in this instance, but they're certainly trying. And if you look at the public participation process, I just want to bring that up before we forget to talk about it. We delivered 283,436 public comments. If the government was going to read each and every one of these comments, and they were going to spend on average a minute on them, it would take 4,724 hours or 196 days to reach each and every submission we've delivered. They've had 7 days. Allegedly, they claim they've taken 7 days. So we need to ask, if you've taken 7 days to consider public input, and this infers you've only managed to process a fraction of the input, and of course we have evidence that many comments were deleted without being opened or read, which brings the question, which comments did the department consider? Which did they reject? Which did they accept? And why? What are the criteria for this decision-making process? The public needs to know how it works, because the Constitution demands that the public must be involved in policy formation. And this requires that public comment must be processed and treated in a transparent, consistent, and honest manner, which is a genuine commitment beyond the superficial to our vital democratic processes. Now, the way that this has been handled, a 30-day comment period as opposed to the normal 90, sure, it's regulations are subordinate legislation. You know, they don't have to be treated like an amendment to an act. But when regulations have such far-reaching consequences, then we're no longer dealing within the normal realm. This brings into question, really, how the government has treated this. The Constitution mandated public participation process for the future. It's a very serious sort of situation and if it's allowed to go down this particular road, it's going to set an incredibly worrying precedent, in the sense of, we have these wonderful institutions, we have these wonderful democratic processes, they look beautiful on paper, but if they're not respected and they're not observed, and if they are abused for the purposes of passing expedient legislation for arbitrary reasons, we're actually just living in a tyrannical state, to be honest.
Absolutely. And that's the actual key word here. It's the tyranny of a small political elite basically appropriating as much state power as possible, not to advance your freedom, dear citizen, but to actually crush you, the individual. And really, I speak a lot about the individual, but really we're a family society. South African society is defined by the families in this country who make up the communities across this country. And it's those families, it's those communities who this political elite, this gaggle of commie and socialist politicians, because that's their persuasion. That's their ideological persuasion here. The idea of centralizing more power into the state is very much a leftist persuasion. And this is who we're dealing with in this country. And again, it's very easy for us to sit here and identify who they are, what they do, and their tactics are. But the issue is, and I'm keeping an eye on time here, is how do we fight back? Jacque, let's assume for a moment, and it's very likely that some pasty-faced politician is going to appear before us today and say, well, you know, we found some legal loophole or some reason to extend these powers beyond what we called a transitionary 30-day period, post-disaster period. And now we're going to do X, Y, Z. What is Afriforum going to do to stand up and defend our rights? Because I can tell you now, Jacque, South Africans from across the board are looking to your organization, ironically. And I use the word ironically because often we're told by the media, for example, that people hate Afriforum. But here we have ordinary South Africans from across the walk actually saying, yes, please, Afriforum, fight for us on our behalf. What does that action look like?
Well, the way that the current legislation and the amendment process is structured, there's unfortunately not much that we can do from a legal perspective right now. So we have to wait until these amendments are actually gazetted and they're actually brought into force, which we suspect is going to be tonight because it's the end of that debatable 30-day period. So what we're going to do is, as soon as those amendments are published and they're brought into force by government, we're going to head to courts. We're going to file an application to have it reviewed and to have it set aside. Gideon touched on this earlier on, that many of these regulations won't stand up to constitutional muster, and I think he's absolutely correct. I think the vast majority of these amendments, of these regulations, will not be in line with our constitution. And as we know, the constitution is the most supreme law in this country. So it'll be easy to show that those regulations simply don't fit into the society. It's ridiculous. It's an absolute abuse of power. And I just don't think it's important for people not to lose hope, not to it's difficult not to get fed up and not get frustrated every time someone tells you to put on a mask, or everyone has suffered economically because of these the last 2 years. So it's difficult to keep the faith, but I want to encourage people to do that, to stay positive and to know that even though there are challenges, we are fighting this, and we have a lot of support, and there are a lot of other organizations who are also, and we have faith in our courts. Although I think the vast majority of our government departments have been captured, I do still have faith in our courts, and I believe that this is a fight that we can win through the legal system.
Well, absolutely. And I think if I look at some of the court decisions around the world that have been taken in pushing back against the overreach by politicians, the lockdowns, the asinine mandates in whatever their guises, there is a glimmer of hope in that sense, that in a jurisprudential sense, that courts and judges are beginning to look back and saying, actually, no, we have to stand on the side of those who are yearning for their civil rights, their freedoms. New Zealand is a good example. Most recent example where that mule of a prime minister was literally kicked in the teeth by a judge in that part of the world. Yeah, I said it. But Gideon, let me come to you, brother, because again, I think any legal challenge has to take a multi-pronged approach, and you guys perhaps also have a point of entry in a legal sense in defending people's rights. What are you guys looking to do?
Well, firstly, I think the 283,000 plus comments gives us a locus standi legally in order to represent what the public has said and to ensure that an accurate report of each and every one of those comments is delivered to the public, to the Department of Health, as well as to the court, as well as to guide the legal process through what public participation is, what our concerns were, and where we think there were major significant missteps in this process. And I think this is also where a thanks need to go out, because people in the comment section always ask, okay, but what must we do? And I say, well, you've already done a fair amount. I think by commenting on these draft amendments, that's a form of taking active ownership of your democracy. And it is being literally what we call an active citizen. And I've said it hundreds of times, and I keep repeating myself, but a greater threat to our democracy and our freedom is not tyrannical politicians or tyrannical government. It's citizen apathy. It's where people sit on their hands and they believe they can't make a difference, or they don't think there's a point, or they are lazy. God forbid. That's a terrible reason to not be involved. But participating in these processes, making a meaningful comment. I mean, we all would love to write, no, disagree, F you government, big middle finger, but taking the time to actually submit a meaningful, rational comment as to why you disagree makes a huge difference. It is the fuel in the engine of this process, and it allows us to go in there with an organization like Afriforum and help them as a co-applicant or as a friend of the court in getting an impact, making an impact. So it's not so much what Dear South Africa can do, it's what the people have done, and we're literally just going out there as a representative of the citizenry.
Absolutely. And you best believe, you bet your bottom dollar that the Big Daddy Liberty Show will be standing with Afriforum on this particular issue. Trust you me, the anger levels alone justify it. The sense of being restricted by the worst of our society. Politicians are the scum of our society. Being restricted by those douchebags literally prompts me to act on behalf of the very South Africans who don't have a voice in this issue. So you bet your bottom dollar that we're going to be standing with Afriforum on this one. Y'all might even see me in court too with a few sands in that part of the world, but we'll get to that when we get to that particular moment in time. Fellas, in the last minute, I'll give you each 30 seconds. How do the folks get in touch with the organizations and indeed support the organizations as they rightly should? Gideon?
So you can find us on dearsa.org or dearsouthafrica.coza. The website's all redirected to the same place. That's where everything happens. That's where our commenting process happens. That's where our contact details are. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram, God forbid. Can't find us on TikTok yet. And you can find us on Facebook. And I think the Facebook followers are doing nice. There's about 180,000 of them already. And those are our primary methods of communication with the public, and we engage with the public on there. And it's guys, thank you for taking the time to comment. Like, seriously, we will be continuing communicating with everyone going forward.
Absolutely. Hey man, y'all better get on that TikTok. Gotta reach them kids. It's on that, they're on that TikTok. You better get on that Chinese CCP spyware. Jacque, how do the folks get in touch with your organization? And really, beyond getting in touch, how do they support Afriforum? You guys had a wonderful milestone recently of reaching the milestone of 300,000 members, and I'll soon become one of those. But how do we become a member? How do we join?
Well, maybe I should first just add that we are actually on TikTok. So folks can find us there as well. Thank God I don't need to run that channel, but we are on there. So find us on social media, Twitter, Facebook. Afriforum, it's a very straightforward search. And then folks can also, if they want to support us and get involved and join up, they're welcome to go to our website, which is afriforum.coza. And there will be a tab there, get involved or join, and they can just follow the process from there. And then, Sikla, I also need to take this opportunity to thank the South African public and everyone who has supported us so viciously in this fight, because we have been receiving a lot of love, and we're very grateful for that. It keeps us going and keeps us strong.
Absolutely. And with that message, I say, and thank you to the both of you for joining us on tonight's broadcast. That is Gideon Joubert from India, SA, and Jacque Broodryk from Afriforum. I did mean exactly what I said. I will definitely be a part of this fight. And it will all depend on what politicians do tonight. If they do decide to try any nefarious means to extend these powers that they clearly are now drunk on and are very much addicted to. I use the word addicted because tonight's episode was initially going to begin my series on looking at substance abuse and drugs. Generally, we're going to begin with alcohol tonight, but I just said, no, let's have this conversation because it's much more topical, and it quite literally is a here and now conversation. So we might park that drug conversation or the beginning of it to Liberty and Friends on Sunday. We'll have experts and expert analysis on this very topic. But what do you think about tonight's topic, guys? Let's have that conversation. I'm really looking forward to your comments in the comments section. And remember, thank you very much for watching the show. Remember, as I said, if you want to support the Big Daddy Liberty Show, we are wholly dependent on you. People are doing as little as 100 Rand a month, inflation people. 100 Rand a month. Please find all the details in the descriptor of this video. Let's actually begin to rally and defend our rights. With that being said, thank you very much for watching. I will see you on Sunday for Liberty and Friends, 8 p.m. Don't miss it. And with that being said, a reminder, as I always say at the end of every show, of every show, never trust a commie.